In the past 50 years, the war on cannabis has destroyed families, filled prisons with nonviolent offenders, and disproportionately disrupted black and brown communities. Each year, law enforcement across the nation has spent billions of dollars to enforce the criminalization of cannabis, despite all the research and evidence that it's safer than alcohol.
Well, it's an exciting show, fans, because we're starting out with pot. As you just heard, that was Governor Fiscal. He was there signing the bill making recreational marijuana, or use of recreational marijuana, legal in Illinois. And we'll be going there to the issue of the day, immigration, and then the fiscal 2020 contract, and fiscal 2020 budget, and then the AFSCME contract. So all of those are highly controversial actual issues, and especially pot was. But as we'll see, we'll just go right now.
Jeff, I would tell you, first of all, the governor doesn't call it pot, and he doesn't call it marijuana. He's always referring to it as cannabis. And as we tape this, the one thing I'd want to point out to people that the governor, when he just signed this bill, a lot of people are just going to be focusing on the fact that the bill makes marijuana, recreational use of marijuana, legal in Illinois. The point we want to bring to you, ladies and gentlemen, is it does many more things than that. This is going to be a prolonged bite coming up, but it spells out some of the other things, and we'll talk about it as we come out.
Percent of the revenue will fund substance abuse treatment and prevention and mental health care. And the rest will be used to pay down the state's bill backlog, help balance our state budget, and support crime prevention, law enforcement, and public education programs. This legislation also offers a low-interest loan program to create opportunity for entrepreneurs in the communities that deserve it most.
It's also going to create new opportunities of investment in our communities who have been victims to these unjust policies, with 25% of the revenue from taxing of cannabis going towards restoring, reinvesting, and renewing these same communities who have often been neglected. And that, for me, is one of the biggest wins. In addition, actually creating the Cannabis Business Development Fund, which is going to provide low-interest business loans to social equity applicants.
From the beginning, Representative Cassidy and I have talked about the three-legged stool that we believe strongly is fundamentally approach to how we needed to legalize cannabis here in Illinois. One, expungement, and make sure that the people who have had their life so disruptive actually have a chance for restoration and getting rid of those charges and good economic opportunities. The second leg of that stool is that, as Governor Pritzker said, one of every $4 that we get in tax revenue is going to go to those neighborhoods that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. No other state has had those dollars being directed exactly to the neighborhoods that deserve it. So I'm very proud of that. We have not been a model, nor has any state, on making it a diverse industry. We don't see the diversity of Illinois reflected in the cannabis industry. And so we have taken a lot of measures here to try to ensure that we actually do put in place an industry that is reflective of the state of Illinois and tools to help make sure we get there. I think we're going to become the model legislation now, setting the gold standard for how this needs to be done in the future. And we're already seeing us getting picked up by other states and looking at how we're going to actually get it passed in our states.
Well, the key word here is experimentation. Illinois is the 11th state to go to recreational marijuana. The governor, I know, wants to say cannabis, but it is recreational marijuana. But the big deal here, Illinois more than anybody else is dealing with expungement. They're also dealing with what you might call social engineering, a cultural change. So a lot is in this bill, one of the 6 major pieces of legislation that the governor passed toward the last week or two of the session. I mean, they're talking about they're going to structure this industry. Hey, this is not the free market. This is Illinois. We decide here who's going to be licensed. We decide whether we can take people who've been downtrodden and low income and make them into entrepreneurs. Well, we'll see. We'll see how that implementation goes. Somebody might say, if you're a libertarian, why all the regulation? If this is just like liquor, just like cigarettes, just make it over 21, and let anybody come in and sell it, right? I'm just asking.
Well, it is controversial, obviously, which is why this has been illegal for all these decades, and now it's not. And, there are compelling arguments being made by both sides. The law enforcement community is saying one of the problems with making marijuana legal to use recreationally is we don't have a test to determine how intoxicated someone is. So if we pull someone over and there's high on marijuana, we don't have a test as we do to say that they're over the limit as we do in alcohol. Some people might say that's a minor point, or there are other ways, or you could just have maybe the driver weaving through traffic on a police camera if they have that video. But anyway, that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think Senator Staines would differ from you. I think she says you can do it with swabs, roadside tests with swabs. She says it's been done elsewhere, should be done here. May not be done as much as we perfected, perhaps, with alcohol, but there are people who think that's pretty well set as a standard. Well, but yeah, it is experimentation, Terry. There are going to be a lot more problems than anybody anticipate. I bet we're going to have a lot more regulation than you'd anticipate. That means you'll have more of a black market than you anticipate, because this prices is going to be very pricey. So illegally, you're going to be able to get it cheaper, maybe similar quality control, and that means the revenue has
You know,
to
one of
go
the
up.
thing Senator Staines said, not in that bite, but in other, is one of the things they're looking at is that when marijuana is being sold on the street, it is often filled with other ingredients that can be very harmful to someone's health, if not deadly. And this is going to be controlled. So she would make the argument, I think, maybe analogous to having meat inspectors in a meat plant. If you didn't, maybe they'd be throwing rat meat in with the hamburger. But now we have meat inspectors in a meat plant, and we're going to have these growers that are going to be regulated. The level of THC in this marijuana is going to be controlled. It's not controlled when you're buying it off the black market. So the other thing that we heard in the bite, and I think is unique to Illinois, and we'll have to see if this is the gold standard, as she said, is that they're trying to address the black community and the Hispanic community, these minority communities where maybe marijuana has been used a lot. Arguably, they say, as much as the white community has done it as much as the Hispanic and black community, but they say statistics show that those minority communities have been prosecuted at a far higher rate. So to make up for that, we're going to have expungements of low-grade dealers, under 30 grams or less, and as long as they had not engaged in violence, then they're going to be able to maybe get that off their record. And then the argument is that's going to help those communities economically, because a lot of these people that have a felony record often cannot get a decent job, and without that felony on their record, they will be.
Well, that's true, and that's a major part of the bill. Lieutenant Governor Stratton's worked really hard on that part with many others. That is the expungement record, that is the second chance, that is people for nonviolent crimes that were relatively inconsequential, some would say, for society, have suffered greatly. What we find out is, have we learned much? Because others point out, it is a detriment to have a record, obviously, to go for a job, especially if it's felony conviction of that type as opposed to just an arrest. But it's also, there are many other things that are holding these folks back from getting jobs. They need wraparound services, they need a place to live, they need ID, they need some stability in their life, mental health, physical health. If we don't do all of those things, I think you're going to find out we're going to overestimate the benefits of this particular legislation. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but we ought to do more than just focus on this one aspect of it, expungement, if we're truly going to give people a second chance.
You know, I will point out that I've told people over the years, and I think it's helpful when we're often covering legislation. Passing a bill does not stop an action. It merely makes it illegal, or in this case, legal. And we could also apply that argument to often what the Democrats are trying to do on gun control. You can pass all the gun control you want. That doesn't mean that people are going to stop using guns or breaking the law. You can pass a law against speeding. It doesn't mean people are going to stop speeding. You know, so to consider that. One other thing that Senator Staines said there in the end of her bite, that we're the gold standard, and other people are looking at what Illinois did. Two of our senators, at least, Senator Staines and I believe Troy Hutchison, were also trying to help the New York legislature pass a bill this past week, and New York was unable to do it. They were saying that was a difference of governors, and they were crediting, rightly or wrongly, the impact of Governor Pritzker here in Illinois as being a hands-on governor and getting this passed. So for what that's worth, it wasn't passed in New York, it did happen here, and then that takes effect in January. And by the way, if you're going to be using marijuana, you cannot be using it out in the public.
Yeah, and it doesn't start until January 1.
Right.
So, folks, if you're getting ready to smoke a joint, you're going to want to put that off until January 1. Of course,
And
you
do
may
it at
not be
home.
smoking
Yeah.
it, or edibles, whatever. But it looks like we're running low on time, so we may want to get to another hot topic of the day, immigration, right?
Right. Earlier this week, the governor signed 3 different bills. Immigration, obviously, a major issue, both at the national level and here in Illinois. Let's listen to some of the things when the governor talked about 3 bills he signed earlier this week impacting immigration.
Allow private entities to profit off of the intolerance of this president. Second, I am signing legislation that prohibits local law enforcement from engaging in federal immigration enforcement. The job of our law enforcement here in Illinois is to protect and serve our communities. We protect no one by having local police departments act as an extension of ICE. This administration aims to build trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve, especially so that witnesses can come forward without fear of reprisal. And that's exactly what we're going to do, protect people. Finally, I am signing legislation that encourages more students to stay in school and work in Illinois by expanding MAP grants and institutional aid available to both undocumented and transgender students.
Well, look, we're in the middle of crisis. Okay, so this immigration in Illinois has to be viewed in that context. We are a sanctuary state, essentially. We are a sanctuary city in Chicago. We do not cooperate with the feds on. That's what you've just heard. Part of that, what Governor Fiscal said. Okay, we really, in a sense, some would say, want to grow toward full citizenship for undocumented individuals. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should. Maybe we shouldn't. But that's kind of what's going on here. I mean, people are downstate, they may not know. Upstate, I was at a press conference in Chicago just a few days ago, and Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky was there, Mayor Lightfoot was there, Alderman Osterman was there, and this was in Uptown, just north of Lincoln Park. The short of it, the message is, hey folks, if the President of the United States is talking about a crackdown in 2 weeks, if you folks nationally can't work out an immigration issue, don't worry. We're going to protect you. We're going to try to advise you so you don't, if somebody's knocking on your door, they don't have a warrant, ignore them. We don't cooperate with these folks. So I think some of what we're doing here on the immigration issue, has to be viewed in that context nationally of what's going on, so people understand, what we're doing, right?
Right, and then the other issue on the context, one of the things that Republicans, not only in Illinois, but around the nation have been saying, is that the Democratic Party, at least nationally, if not in Illinois, is against the border barrier, that they have a plan to flood the nation with illegal immigrants because they want to have these people turn red states into blue states and to make it impossible for the Republicans to ever elect a president again. They're targeting, it is said, Texas, they're targeting Florida, and Illinois has long been blue. But also there was a spokesman at the signing of these bills on immigration where a spokesman was saying what sounded to be like they want to sign up some of those who are here illegally to be voting in our elections.
We are preparing to be counted in the Census 2020. We are registering people to vote because our vision of citizenship is more than immigration status. We're making sure that anyone, regardless of where they were born, can be an engaged citizen.
So there you are, Terry. I mean, that's newsmaking. I think a lot of the media missed that one. So we have somebody here at an event sponsored by Governor Pritzker at a bill signing advocating signing up people to register to vote, even though he knows them not to be legal citizens? Isn't that against the law? Wouldn't somebody comment on that? He might say, we'd like to have this situation like that. We'd like to have these people vote. People have talked in Chicago about non-citizens voting in Chicago elections. Maybe Chicago can do that. Maybe they can't. Okay, but that's the larger context of the news. As we tape this, many people are seeing this photo nationally. They're seeing a father from El Salvador trying to cross the Rio Grande into the United States, tired of waiting for political asylum. Most would say he didn't qualify for asylum. His is a case of fleeing a country either due to violence or poverty and so forth. The point is, he didn't make it, okay? He and his daughter, this photo shows, his 2-year-old daughter, drowned. And there they are. And what do some people say, Terry? And this is important relative to Chicago. Some people, what we should do, Terry, is have that infant formula with diapers, with playgrounds, with play space, so we can have lots coming in America, unauthorized, and we are obligated to take care of them. This has been the major change in immigration. Before, just a few years ago, it was single males. Now we have tons of families coming in for a variety of reasons we won't go into. It's much harder to deal with that in terms of deporting or not and dealing with them and having them tested for asylum. The point is, the world has changed nationally. The world could be changing in Illinois. And the question is, nationally and in Chicago, much as when you see somebody who you'd like to help, like a person who's striving and wants a better situation, and his 2-year-old daughter, you'd like to help them. But can you help everybody in all of South America? And if you do help these folks, are you not helping some of the people low income in unsafe areas themselves in Chicago, where we have tremendous violence problems?
Before we,
There's a trade-off.
before we run
What do
out
we
of
do?
time, let me jump ahead and just say, one thing that, I was just listening to a national political advisor, and he was saying, obviously, immigration is going to be one of the key issues in all of its manifestations, and whether we, by that, should we be building the wall? That was a big issue. It was one of the key reasons why Donald Trump got the Republican nomination back in 2016. It's going to be one of the major issues along with the economy in 2020. And as we tape this, we are beginning the race for president in 2020. The Democrats are beginning their debate tonight. There's going to be so many candidates. They're going to have 2 nights of the first Democratic debate, Jeff, and that's going to be coming up. So we wanted to be bringing this up because obviously it's not just a national issue. It will be a huge national issue. It's impacting so many elements of what happens here in Illinois as well.
Right. I mean, and it's just, again, this trade-off issue. How do we allocate resources? We can't be the policemen of the world in terms of national security issues. We need assistance from our allies. We can't also be the policeman in the world and becoming the social worker of the world to take care of all of the downtrodden. And some people say, as you know, and we'll hear some of this discussion tonight, is it America first or is it the world first? So you raise it, that's a good point. 18 months left to the presidential election. The election starts tonight with the Democratic primary debate.
The one last thing before we leave it that the Republicans often point out, in the language being used, and I say this for the listeners, the one thing you never hear the Democrats say is the word illegal. And the President of the United States has been married 3 times. 2 of his wives were immigrants. We are a nation of immigrants. I don't think anyone argues against that. What is part of this conversation, at least on the Republican side, is, but aren't we supposed to follow the law? Aren't we supposed to be a nation of borders? We can't just go into Canada. We can't just go into Mexico. Every nation has borders, and it's about the legality of immigration status. That's something that we often hear, and we can listen to these debates. The Democrats seem not to want to address the issue of, are people coming into the country according to the law?
Right. Some would say, Terry, that's a very quaint concept you have of legal immigration versus illegal immigration. Some would say the National Democratic Party has long gone past this. These are humanitarian issues, Terry. If you have people who are in trouble, whether they're suffering from violence in South America, whether they're suffering from poverty, it's our job as humanitarians in America to extend a helping hand. There are others who say the helping hand has to start here in this country first. It'll be the debate, perhaps the major debate, in the 2020 election.
And Jeff, the other big issue, of course, as we sit here at the end of June, hard to believe, but we are about to come up to July, and what does July mean? It means the start of a brand new fiscal year for the state of Illinois. On July 1, we begin fiscal year 2020.
Yeah, and the thing is, although the governor and the Democrats, with the help of Republicans on this, passed a new budget, an operating budget, just a few weeks ago, there's been very little discussion of the big picture. We know it increased sort of at the last minute to $40.6 billion, just like the capital budget increased at the last minute from $41.5 billion to $45 billion. So those are big numbers, but I bet if you ask people, where does that money on the revenue side come from, that $40.6 billion, I think a lot of folks won't know, but we can tell them. We've got some information on that, roughly, very rough numbers, right?
We do, and let me just say that as we go into here, let's take a look at some of the revenue numbers that the governor would say is a balanced budget. We're going to, on these graphics, show it as being balanced, but just keep in mind, other critics say the budget is nowhere near balanced. But Jeff, let's talk about the...
Yeah, so you can see there, folks, they may not realize, $40 billion, and almost half of it comes from the individual income tax. A relatively small amount, much smaller, comes from corporate income tax. Fairly large comes from the sales tax. Other taxes, relatively small, cigarette taxes, public utility. And then we got the lottery and casinos. Those numbers may go up in the future as we talk of adding six casinos throughout the state of Illinois, or it may not, because, you know, we maybe have too many casinos. And then we get some money from the feds, mostly as matching grants on the Medicaid program. That's $4 billion, right? So that's our $40.6 billion that we're planning to spend in the fiscal year that starts in about a week. And so that's what we have available. Some people say that's what we have available to spend. Our critics would say we don't really know the number, because although the legislature usually comes up with a number, this year they apparently didn't. Okay, so $40.6 billion. I guess the next question is, how are we spending? And there we go. We got a nice graphic there, Terry, thanks to Terry, who shows us how that money is being spent. And notice the big picture. You know, the three big items, the three big drivers that account for about 2/3 of our spending in the state of Illinois: education, pensions, and Medicaid. Education is divided into kindergarten through 12, which has $9 billion. That's the state portion of spending in Illinois. And PS stands for public safety. Some of our safety is crowded out by pensions. And government services, that's just things like DCFS, that is Department of Family Services and so forth. And then we got debt payments. So that's the big picture of $40.6 billion. And that's the big picture of the contract. And by the way, very little discussion, because the Republicans put a lot of votes, like 10 votes, 9 or 10 votes, Republicans on voting for that. So they really can't complain too much about it, can they?
Well, that's going to be what we're going to see, and that's when the governor is happy to point out that he had a bipartisan, he would say a balanced budget, he would also say a bipartisan budget, and he's right, he got Republican votes on some of that, not all Republicans, but certainly some. And he also got Republican votes on the Capitol bill, $45.5 billion or so going out, and that's over a period of 6 years, as I recall, that's going to be spent out. So, you know, a lot of people are saying this is great news, that, and it is good news, at least the fact that we're passing a budget, whether we can afford the budgets that we're passing. The governor would say it's balanced. As our regular viewers will know, when we recently interviewed Sheila Weinberg with Truth in Accounting, she would say while you're spending $8 billion in pensions, and that might be according to what you're supposed to be spending, if you remember, she says that's not what the actuaries are saying. They're saying we should be spending $13 billion, $5 billion more than we are on pensions, if you actually want to be putting enough money aside to meet your obligations.
Right. So the big picture, where are the reforms? I don't see them. That's what the critics say, not just what we're saying. Critics say there aren't really any reforms in that budget, whether pension reforms on Medicaid. There were some, but they don't. The critics say not substantial. Reforms on education, they would say not substantial. So that's one question. The other big one looming for November 2020 is, will the voters of Illinois, now that it's been put on the ballot, vote to approve a progressive income tax? And will what Governor Pritzker says, that initially that will produce $3.4 billion, will that deal with structural issues on spending? Will it be approved? Will it be rejected? We don't know.
I don't know. It's going to be
on to our
interesting to
next
see
topic.
what are the issues going to be as we go into 2020. That's going to be the halfway year for the governor. And the big issue, as you just said, is the governor going to get his constitutional amendment to have a progressive tax? The Republicans, we heard Bill Brady last week bring that up. That's going to be one of their battlegrounds fights. But, you know, it's going to be interesting. And to pick up what we were talking about last week, the other thing is, who now speaks for the Republican Party? Is it Bill Brady? Is it Jim Durkin in the House? Since the Republican leadership, as far as the governor is gone, and all the obvious speakers from before. We'll have to see, Jeff.
Here's an issue. You might have thought our next topic is the AFSCME, which was ratified by the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. That's the major union in the state of Illinois representing state and local employees, in this case, the state employees. And so we've got 60,000 of them. Here's something. Does anybody know the average salary before the contract, before the changes? What was the average salary in the state of Illinois? Roughly $60,000. What's it going to after the contract? $67,000. And where was Illinois relative to other states? We are the second highest state in terms of average salary, $59,700 before the contract. So should we want to be the second highest? And Terry, before you count in health care, okay? Because when you do that, the cost of those state employees average goes to $110,000. And nobody's talking about it, including the Republicans. I haven't heard anybody, hardly in the media.
We're going to try to see
it's
a good point. We're going to try to see if we can do some interviews and get some more information on that. And ladies and gentlemen, some of this information is just hard to get a hold of, but we don't want to be, but we look, I should say, to be digging a little deeper. Yeah,
it's not that tough. I mean, it's out published on a variety of entities. WCI has a reporter who's been on it. Wirepoints has somebody who's been doing work on it. So
and
it's
we'll
out
have to
there.
see if we can as well, but it's come to that time again, Jeff. Another week has gone by. Our look at politics. We'll be taking a look ahead next week. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, give us your comments if you wish. And Jeff, we'll see you next week. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.